Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Kathy. Before I introduce Sarah, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we meet today. I recognise their diverse culture, strength, and resilience, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I extend my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today. I also extend my respects to those with a lived experience of trauma. I hope that you find this discussion insightful. Remember, if at any time the content of this talk triggers a trauma or unwelcome response for you, please be kind to yourself, take a break, and seek professional help as required. You can contact Lifeline on 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224636 for assistance. Please call 000 or the emergency number for the country you are located if you require urgent assistance. Please note we cannot provide individual counselling or medical advice. I'd like now to introduce Dr. Sarah Woodhouse. Sarah is a research psychologist and a trauma expert who grew up and trained in the UK and now lives in Australia with her husband and 3 children. Her research explores how different ways of thinking, feeling, and being can affect trauma symptoms. In her work, Sarah uses her knowledge and her personal experience to help people break free from their past and reclaim their lives. I've listened to Sarah's audiobook and I'm very much looking forward to discussing the concepts she explores in her book, You're Not Broken. And I'd just like to welcome Sarah.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you here. And firstly, I'd like to thank you, Sarah, for both writing this book and taking the time to discuss it here with me today. Although I'm sure there's many books on the topic of trauma out there, I feel that not many are as approachable for a general audience as yours. Can you please describe how you came to write this book and who's it intended for?
Yes, what a great question. How I came to write the book, I don't know where to start. I mean, obviously I've researched trauma for a really long time and I did so as an academic. So I've talked about trauma and written about trauma for many, many, many years, but with my researcher hat on. So there was no swearing in my research papers, whereas in the book there are a couple. So that's a big difference. But so how it came about is I researched trauma for about 10 years and I was funded by the UK's Medical Research Council. And during that time, I'd also had my own journey with trauma and trauma recovery. Actually, I would say that began even before that. And we came to Australia 2 years ago, and I was applying for grants and talking to people at different universities about doing more academic work. And I just woke up. I literally woke up one morning and I just thought, I want to write a book. This doesn't feel right. I don't want to just talk to academics anymore. I'm not a natural academic. I'm sure, as you can see me here sitting with my crystal. I'm not a natural academic. That is the truth of me. And I loved my time doing it, but I am so much more comfortable speaking in my own words to normal people about everyday stuff. And that's the book I wanted to write, was to take all the trauma stuff and channel it into a book that we could all engage with and understand. Because I personally, even though I work in trauma, when I was going through my own stuff and having to do my own work, I actually found most of the texts really heavy and a bit complicated and a little bit overwhelming. So I wanted to fill that gap and make it a topic that we could all talk about.
Yeah, and like I said, I've listened to the audiobook, and for anybody who gets a chance to listen to it, it is amazing. And Sarah actually narrates it herself. But the introduction to the book is a great way to set the scene. Would you like to read just a little excerpt just to show that the level of writing that it is?
So happily. Sorry, I've got gunk on my glasses. Here we go. I'll just read the first little bit, shall I? Let me find it, bear with me. Okay. I've seen a lot of different therapists over the years. Some were great, some good, and some worryingly bad. When I was 23, one of the great ones said to me, "Every symptom and issue you bring to me, Sarah, makes me believe that you carry trauma. I think something happened in your past that made you deeply overwhelmed and afraid, and you're still reacting to it." I stared at her in stunned silence. I'd had a stable upbringing. I'd been to a good school. I was struggling, yes, but I hadn't been through anything traumatic. Once I regained my composure, I decided I'd better set her straight. "You've got it totally wrong," I told her firmly. "I don't have trauma." "Okay," she said, and I pretty much left there and then. My defensive "how dare you" response to the therapist's suggestion that I carried trauma was about my own denial, but it also reflects a wider cultural fear of what trauma means. Within mainstream culture, 3 false truths about trauma persist. First, that trauma is a disorder. Second, that trauma only happens to an unlucky few who experience very extreme events and symptoms. Third, that trauma permanently damages us, leaving us fundamentally broken. The result of these misperceptions is, of course, that many of us are afraid of the word. We push it away when really what we need to do is move towards it so we can better understand it. Is that enough?
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you. And I think it sums it up beautifully about what the book is about and the expectations that, I mean, the title in itself says it all. It really resonates with me, is that this is a book that's for the real people. It's not to say you must do this and I've done this and it's brilliant and things like that. It's more about just an enlightening experience. But firstly, the very, very first thing that you do in this book is define trauma. And you refer to that definition quite often during the book. And it was particularly enlightening as you describe trauma as a reaction rather than something that happens to a person. Can you share the definition of trauma and expand on what it means for recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. So trauma is a reaction to any kind of experience that leads us to feel overwhelmed, out of control, and powerless. So they're the 3 things that we're looking for. And that any event is a really important piece, because I think it draws attention to the fact that, yes, of course, really severe extreme events, you know, like bushfires and floods and assaults, all of that stuff that we think of when we say the word trauma, of course, that can elicit that reaction in us. But what we now know is that commonplace everyday experiences, particularly experiences within relationships for children, but everyday slips and falls as well, like routine medical procedures. You know, there's this whole other raft of experiences that were previously dismissed that can lead to us feeling overwhelmed, out of control, and powerless. And that's the definition I get people to focus on, because those terms are really human, right? We all know what it feels like to feel overwhelmed. We all know what it feels like to feel out of control, and we all know what it feels like to feel powerless and helpless. You know, they're really, they're a heart thing, aren't they? They get us. But what you find in other trauma books is that they explain what's going on in the nervous system, but don't really explain the lived sensations, because what's happening when we experience those 3 things is that our nervous system, so our fight, flight, freeze response, has been set off. So our body is just sort of flooded with hormones. Our body and our mind are flooded with hormones, and the result of those hormones is those 3 things: overwhelm, feeling out of control, and feeling powerless. So they indicate an internal process that's going on within our nervous system, but they're the 3 things to look out for, and the definition that I find most people find the most helpful.
Yeah, I certainly found it very helpful. And with the title, You're Not Broken, the definition of trauma links into that very much so, is that this ultimately is not a sign that there's something wrong with you, but rather it's a sign that something is very much right.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
saying that. It's a very beautiful thing to say. I haven't heard it phrased that way. That's not my phrasing, that's your phrasing, and it's really beautiful. But it is trauma. Trauma is a protective response. It's something we've all experienced. You know, we've all had the traumatic reaction because it's part of us. It's protective, it's beautiful, it's so human. The issue isn't the reaction. The issue, or rather where the problem comes, is later down the line. It's almost like our reaction to the reaction that causes the issue and keeps us stuck in it. But the trauma itself is protective, as you say.
And how, as individuals, how do we identify trauma in ourselves, and how important is recognizing that you're triggered? How important is that in terms of how you manage your trauma?
In terms of signs and symptoms, the truth is trauma is really, really broad. And that's another main theme that runs through the book is, yes, there are the symptoms we've all heard of, but really it's a list as long as the room. You know, trauma can pop up in very odd ways in our thinking, in our body, in our relationships. So that's the first thing I would say. But the common signs that we see, there are cognitive symptoms. So you know, symptoms get in our mind, and a strong inner critic is a really common one. You often find, and I'm not going to explain why each one happens, because I don't think we've got time for that. So instead, I'll just list them. But a strong inner critic and feeling like a failure, so having low self-worth and low self-belief, is extremely common. Worry and rumination is also really, really, really common. And both of these are all to do with what's going on in our nervous system, really, and all to do with the fear, and also all the hormones that are kind of coursing around. Also kind of obsessive planning and thinking. And also there are more sort of cognitive symptoms like brain fog, poor memory, confusion. There are other cognitive things as well. And I'm not saying that everyone will experience these. I'm saying these are the common ones. You're unlikely to have all of them, but some of them you may recognize, they might resonate with you. So they're the sort of cognitive ones. And then I encourage people to look at the body and think about what's going on there. And there we're thinking about physical and emotional symptoms. Often feeling shame, anger, or fear is very common, because it means that you're getting triggered. And by triggered, I mean it means that something in your surroundings or something in a relationship or in a situation is reminding you of a past trauma. And so that emotional reaction keeps sort of popping up. And shame, anger, and fear really are the common ones. Strong emotional reactions, again, that's to do with the triggered reaction. So a strong reaction or a strong repetitive reaction is often a sign. Anxiety-like symptoms are really common on one end of the spectrum, and that's if we are having more of a fight-flight response. But if we've had more of a freeze response, we're actually going to really be experiencing feeling quite numb and shut down, emotionally and physically. Actually, I've had that freeze response. It's been a big problem for me at certain points, and I actually physically felt very disconnected and odd, and it can feel quite surreal in terms of how you're relating to your body. And then there's the behavioural stuff as well, which I think often is missed out of the conversation, sadly. So you've got all the cognitive stuff, all the stuff that's going on in your body, but then behaviourally what we'll see is avoidant coping and avoidant strategies. And by avoidant, I mean the thing we're trying to avoid are our feelings. So our feelings are so overwhelming and painful that we do really anything we can to avoid them. And that impulse to avoid can become stronger and stronger over time, because we're not developing the coping mechanisms needed to actually be with and deal with our feelings. So what you'll see is that those kind of compulsive behaviors, and there I'm talking about things like compulsive spending, compulsive busyness, compulsive. I mean, you can take the word compulsive and just put anything at the end, really. We can do anything compulsively, right? But it's all about distraction. It's about not being able to be with our body and our feelings and kind of moving away. So feeling something in here and then reaching outside to kind of try and plug the hole or distract us from it. And distraction, is an important one. Of course, you've got anything to do with food and alcohol, using substances as well to try and avoid our feelings through. So they're the three categories to be mindful of. It's mind, body, and behavior, and that's where it will all pop up. And in terms of triggers, I mean, I think, and I'm getting so much feedback about the book, and actually the piece about triggers and explaining just how important it is that we all understand what our triggers are, how they present, and what our reaction is a really, really critical learning. And everything in our lives is better if we can begin to do our trigger work. So really think about what it is that's reminding us of our past traumas, those past moments where we felt overwhelmed, threatened, and out of control. And of course, and we're feeling powerless. And considering those and thinking about how they're showing up in our day-to-day. Yeah, it's really important work.
So once you've identified what triggers you and you've identified how your body reacts to it, what can you do then to help ease those symptoms?
The truth is there are a lot of different things, and it's going to depend on the level of your reaction and the severity, the strength of the reaction. There's an awful lot that we can do at home. That's what I encourage people. And I really do encourage people to begin there, because if we think about it, so the traumatic reaction happens in a loop. So first we experience it in our body. So we get those physical and emotional symptoms. And then we get the cognitive, all of that stuff's going on. And then there's something behavioral as well. And all of it really is about pushing away our feelings. And so the simple antidote, the simple and extremely hard solution, really, because it is quite hard, is to learn to or try to be with our feelings more on a day-to-day. So when we feel whether we've been triggered or whether we're just feeling really uncomfortable or anxious, whatever it might be, it's pausing, acknowledging how we're feeling and allowing it. So being with the body and noticing where it is. And people are always really surprised when I tell them how many hours a day I do this. I mean, in all seriousness, part of my recovery is a commitment to always being with my feelings and in a really authentic way. So I really do take the time to do it. If I'm having a difficult day, like this morning, I had a really tough time with the kids and I was feeling overwhelmed, and I could feel that I was about to be triggered, because I've done the work for so long now. I can almost feel myself go up and the trigger about to happen. So I just left, I left my husband and I went onto the balcony and I just sat with my body and I put my hand on my chest, on my heart, and I just felt what I needed to. I owned it. I'm feeling triggered because I'm feeling afraid or I'm feeling anxious, whatever it might be. So naming the feeling and then noticing where it's showing up in my body. So realizing that my heart was pounding, my jaw was really tense, my shoulders were tense, I had tingling in my hands. And the simple process, I call it simple, but I know that it's not, but that simple process of connecting with our body and moving towards our feelings instead of pushing them away is a really important part of the healing. But I would caveat that with, for a lot of people, that is really, really, really hard. A lot of people that have trauma, that's really hard. I started doing this work probably 10 years ago, this kind of somatic work where you learn to be with your feelings in a more of a physical way. And I found it excruciatingly painful, because trauma wants us not to be with it. It's doing everything it can to pull us away from our feelings and our body. So the truth is I had to do that with a therapist to start with. So I needed to have someone there with me, helping helping me know what it meant to feel my feelings. So I would caveat it with, it's okay if you can't do that, but potentially maybe that's when we might start thinking, okay, well, who can I work with to help me connect with my feelings and my body a bit more?
Yeah, and you do mention in your book as well too about finding the right person to help you, or the right support network. I think you had a couple of tips in there. I can't quite recall what they were, but I think most of it was trusting your instinct and your gut feeling about that person.
Yes, absolutely. It's really hard. Honestly, I am inundated. My work life is, since the book's come out, it's funny really, because I'm spending most of the day, not most of the day, but a lot of the day responding to emails. And a question I get very often is, can you recommend a therapist? Please, can you help me find one? How do I find one? And these are people from all different walks of life and in all different countries. And of course, even though I want to kind of see where they are and find them the therapist that I would recommend. It's not ethical. I can't do that, nor do I have the time. So what I tend to tell people is it's really critical that, of course, they specialize in trauma. I often say it's really helpful if they've also specialized in addiction. And I know that word, I feel like that word could trigger a lot of people. But the reason I say that is because I'm sure some of you have picked up on it, but trauma pushes us to avoid, and it pushes us down that compulsive line. So a therapist that really understands how all those compulsive behaviors can show up, not necessarily in addiction, it's not always that, but someone that understands the framework around that can also be really helpful. So I'll tend to recommend people that so they specialize in trauma, and they have an understanding of addiction, a framework around addiction. And also then it's, as you say, it's about trusting your gut, because we can only heal from trauma when we feel safe. So you can go to the best trauma therapist in the world, you could book in with Bessel van der Kolk himself, and if you do not feel safe with him, you will not heal. No good will come in that room, because you, for whatever reason, your body does not feel safe, you do not feel comfortable, so you're not going to be able to feel your feelings. We can only feel our feelings and access them when we feel safe. So the top level thing, almost irrelevant of qualifications and everything else, is you must ensure you feel safe with them. So I would bear that in mind. So that's really the top level. Make sure it's someone you feel really safe with, and speak to them. I'll often, if I'm about to start working with a new therapist, I'll call them, what do you think about this? What's your approach to this? And my body will tell me if it's right. I'll just have that intuition that felt good. I liked her, or I liked him. It's that simple. Our body is giving us the cues we need. But if you felt afraid on the phone, if you intuitively, it just didn't feel quite right, move on. There are tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of therapists. Not all are that great. Some are incredible though. So take your time as you make your choice. And don't be afraid to change your mind. I would encourage you, if you've done 3 sessions with them and you're just thinking, I don't know, I would always empower people to change their minds. It's okay to try someone else.
And I'll just go on to my next question, because it kind of relates to sort of getting help and working through your issues. But in particular, I like that you mentioned the role of yoga in your recovery. And in fact, listening to you through the audiobook was like being in a class with my yoga teacher. She's also English. And I felt very calm and relaxed when I was listening to you read out your book. How important is your yoga practice for you?
Over the years, it's been incredibly important, and the truth is, and I think it's really good to own this and let people know that was my gentle way into trauma healing. I wasn't ready to do deep somatic experiencing work with a therapist. I wasn't ready to sit on the balcony and feel all my feelings and have a cry. I just wasn't ready. And I would encourage everyone to go at their own speed. You know, trauma healing happens gently. It's like this gentle spiral. We start where it feels comfortable and we just slowly work our way into the center of the hurt if we need to. Not everyone needs to go there, right? But start where it feels comfortable. So for me, yoga was the comfortable thing because I knew that it would help me connect with my body. I knew there would be release and really that sense of connection, I suppose, authentic connection with my body. So even before I started my proper, you know, trauma work, that's what I was doing. And still now on a daily basis. Well, that's a total lie. I just lied to everyone. I wish it was on a daily basis. Some weeks it's on a daily basis. Some weeks it's on a bi-daily basis. Some weeks it's twice a week. But either way, I recognize how important it is. It brings me home. You know, our body is there to be a source of grounding. You know, it helps us connect with the moment and it helps us just be here. So for someone like me who is so up here and can be triggered and whose energy is go, 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 it's an immediate, it brings me right down, you know, literally right down to the floor, right down to my feet. So, and given that my understanding of, you know, most people that I've worked with and met who've experienced trauma have a very similar experience with their body, I recommend it to everyone.
And for those people who aren't into yoga and yoga is just not for them, do you have anything else that that you can recommend that has a similar sort of effect on people?
Oh, I would say anything that gets you moving. You know, one of a great trauma therapy, in fact, for a while I did it, that is dance. You know, anything that is helping you connect with your body in the moment. So I'm not talking about running, but having your headphones on and thinking about work. That does not count. So it's all about being with your body. You know, it's about being present in the moment with your body. But no, it doesn't. I truly believe it does not have to be yoga. It's a great thing to do, but it can be dance. It can be any kind of movement. It can be walking. Any movement that is present will work, but present is the key. It's being with your body rather than being, you know, up here.
Yeah, I just saw a comment pop up. So, I think it was from Rush saying a nice mindful walk.
Yes,
is beautiful.
And it is fantastic.
Yeah. Moving on to a word which is kind of a buzzword right now, resilience. We hear it a lot, especially in relation to all the massive changes that our world has undergone in the past year and 18 months or so. Resilience, what is it and why is it so important?
Resilience, quite simply, is the ability to bounce back up after we've been knocked down. You know, I think that's probably the best definition to give. And it's something that we develop. I mean, honestly, some of the most resilient people I have met and who are in my life today are people who have experienced quite severe trauma, you know, because it's the struggle. It's the feeling knocked down and needing to get back up and painfully kind of learning how to do that and how to rebuild that builds the resilience. I am more resilient now at 38 than I was at 23, of course, not because it's been a sea of roses and joy between that time, but because there have been struggles, and each struggle, whether I've liked it or not, something in me has called me to rise up and heal through them. And each moment of pain has developed my resilience. So in this sphere, as we talk about trauma healing, I think it's really critical that we all acknowledge the resilience that we have shown to date, and the resilience that it takes to heal and grow, I suppose.
And I have to move on to a question about the role of people who care for people who've experienced trauma. Often often it's kind of the image of someone has to help someone be fixed, or what is the role of people who care?
I think that's great. And I love that you use that word, because that's what we all want to do, right? That's certainly what I want to do with my husband and my children. I want to fix them. And I mustn't, and I can't, and I mustn't, and life gets quite painful when I try to. That's the truth. When I forget that, my life gets quite painful for me and for them. The best way that we can help anyone in our lives that is experiencing a traumatic reaction, whether they're in the acute severe stage because it's just happened, or whether they are experiencing triggers today, multiple triggers, say at work or at home, whatever it might be, the best thing that we can do is, first of all, there's two things I would say. The first one is all about validation. So it's allowing them and understanding that the most powerful thing we can do is allow them to feel seen, heard, and understood. And I know there was a question, wasn't there? Someone was speaking about a 13-year-old that they knew, and I would encourage them to remember that phrase. The most powerful thing you can do, I think it was a young girl, the most powerful thing you can do for her is help her feel seen, heard, and understood. And in practical terms, I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but in practical terms, that just means, instead of trying to change the feeling or fix the feeling, you just see it, you just state it back. So when she comes back from school and says, I feel so sad, I feel so anxious, it's the simplicity of saying, you're feeling really sad today and you're feeling really anxious, and I really get it. That's the thing we can do for people, because I think the danger is there's almost this gap when we've experienced a trauma. We're very vulnerable in terms of our meaning and our beliefs. So we're very open at that time to developing really very self-limiting beliefs, and can be quite damaging beliefs about ourselves and about the world. The world isn't safe, I'm bad, all men are dangerous, all women are dangerous, whatever it might be. And I think it's being aware that within that context, just seeing their feelings. So there's the seeing the feelings, and then helping them, just always bringing the hope. So it's that juggle. I said there were only two things, but actually there are three, because we see their feelings, we hear and see their feelings, we bring hope where we can. I know it's so painful, but it will pass. You can do this, it will pass. So those two pieces are key. But the third piece also is ensuring that we're the rock that they need. Because co-regulation, I'm sure some of you have heard of that, co-regulation is a real thing. What that means is we're such social creatures that if I am completely regulated, and by that I mean if my nervous system is balanced, doing what it should be, it's not in flight or fight, it's just calm, I'm just here, my feet are on the floor, I'm grounded, I'm present. If you come to me and you are experiencing fight, fight, freeze, and I can remain grounded and calm, instead of doing what many of us do, we see a friend or a partner or whoever it is in pain, and we respond with panic, right? So one of the kids runs towards me, they're upset or bleeding, whatever it might be, they've had a tumble. The mum in me panics, and I go up. I meet their traumatic reaction with my own stress. But the truth is, the best thing we can do in that moment, it's all the phrase, and I think it's really powerful image, is we put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. If you can remain grounded, your regulated nervous system will help theirs regulated. So when they come to you, it'll almost be like they're coming to a tree or a rock. They're gonna get this sense of solidity that they need, and it will bring them down, and it will bring them down quite quickly. So they're the three things that I would suggest people remember. It's validation, not feeling like you need to fix. It's just seeing, hearing, validating, accepting, and understanding what people are saying, accepting the experience as it is, rather than trying to change it, which we all do, rather than trying to add logic. It's just accepting what they're experiencing, accepting what they're feeling is so, so powerful and will help them heal. Also, wherever we can, remembering to be a voice of hope. And then third up, it would be all about that kind of co-regulation piece, which is really important.
And in terms of the co-regulation piece, quite often we hear people, when someone's starting to stress out, saying, just breathe, just breathe. Mm-hmm. Breathing is something we do automatically, but when we do it consciously, how does it affect our ability to co-regulate?
That's a great question. I love that. The thing that springs to mind, obviously, is polyvagal breathing, which I'm sure if you've read the book, you'll remember. Polyvagal theory is changing the world, and it's absolutely incredible. I can't take any credit for it. It's not my work at all. It's Stephen Porges' work, and he has dedicated his life to understanding the vagus nerve, which is just here. I'm not sure if you can see me, but it's a very long nerve, and it runs sort of almost from up here all the way down your head, down the middle, and into your gut. So we're very interested in it, in the sort of relationship between the brain and the gut. Of course, we're all very interested in that nowadays, aren't we? So that's part of why I suspect he got his funding. But what he has taught us is that this vagus nerve is really critical in helping us control our nervous system. And very simply, there are ways. So we want to stimulate this. We want this nerve to be working as well as it can be. And a simple way to do that, there are two different types of breathing that we can practice daily. So I do practice them daily, multiple times a day. But separate to that, we can also use them if we feel that we're about to get triggered, if we feel we're about to get stressed. And honestly, truly, I call this the CEO hack, because I know so many very high pressured, high profile people who use this breathing before they have to go on stage, before they have to speak. I spoke to a very prominent banker the other day who said he uses it, and I was gobsmacked that he'd even heard of it. But you simply, there are different ways of stimulating it, but the two ways that we can use our breath, there's the 4-8 rule, or there's the VU sound. And the 4-8 rule, quite simply, you have to breathe into your belly for the count of 4, and then breathe out for the count of 8. The numbers don't really matter. You can do 3-6, you can do 5-10, it doesn't matter, but that ratio is really important. And it's very important that it's not breathing up here, that it's coming right down into your tummy, because it's the diaphragm that matters. So what this type of breath does is it stimulates the diaphragm, because if you can imagine, as you breathe up into your belly, your diaphragm's moving, right? So up into the diaphragm, and then the breath's moving out past the diaphragm as well. You stimulate the diaphragm, and then that stimulates the vagus nerve. And then the vagus nerve switches on our parasympathetic nervous system. So if we're all up in our sympathetic system, we're all aroused, we're in fight, flight, we're stressed, we're anxious, however that might present for people, this breathing technique will switch on your parasympathetic system, and that will bring you right down. And it's shocking to me how well it works. I would say it's something you need to practice. You're going to try it once and kind of go, oh, I kind of feel something. But if you keep practicing it, it's like any part of our body, it's something that will respond as you practice it. So now for me, the response is very strong, very quick, and very powerful, because I've been working with that style of breath for, I don't know, probably about 2-3 years now. The other one is VU, which I also really like. So that's where you take a deep breath into the belly, and then you let it out as a VU sound. So it's VU, and you'll literally keep going until the breath is completely drained. It's doing the same thing. It's just stimulating that diaphragm, which then is stimulating the vagus nerve, which then switches on the parasympathetic system and will turn off and turn down all of those those kind of arousal hormones, the adrenaline and the noradrenaline, that are making us kind of go up, up, up. So in a very long-winded way, that's how we can use breathing.
For sure. And I actually learned how to do that in yoga classes. So I guess it kind of is all a similar kind of thing. It's great for job interviews, just putting it out there. If you're a bit anxious before a job interview, I found that it's really, really helpful. I'm going to move on to some questions, because obviously this book has a lot of content in it, but these questions that I've asked so far are based on my perceptions from listening to the audiobook and from having a look at the text as well. So a couple of people did ask questions, and I think we've covered one. I think that there's one that came through before, and I'm going to get to the ones in the chat in a minute. Somebody's asked, what if we have the symptoms of trauma but can't pinpoint where it's come from?
It's so common. I would say, I'm not even going to put a percent, sorry, that's the researcher in me trying to put a figure on it, but very many people that I speak with and that therapists speak with have the same experience. A lot of our childhood trauma in particular is buried. You know, there's a new, so they used to put the age of amnesia for childhood at 3, then they moved it up to 5, and more recently they've moved it up to 7, because they believe that it's really very hard for most people to remember properly before the age of 7. So if you take that as a fact, of course, if anything happened before the age of 7, which a great deal of childhood trauma, childhood relational trauma in particular does, then you're not going to remember it. It's the symptoms that matter. If you are experiencing trauma symptoms of any kind, trust the symptoms, you know, and trust that if your body and your subconscious needs you to know what that experience was, at some point you may find out, you may not. Many people don't, and that's okay. You can still do your trauma work, you can still heal.
And if somebody's popped in the chat box saying that they're just too broken, what would you say for someone who feels too broken?
I get it. I wish I could give you a cuddle. I just really get it. I have felt very similarly at various points in my life, and I know many people who do and have, and it's okay to feel that way. And I know that you can heal. And it's also totally okay that you can't believe it today. My hope is that if you kind of do your work and continue to open up to different healing modalities, even though you feel so broken, that eventually you'll be able to see it too.
And Lynn's popped a little comment in here that she found healing through writing.
Healing through writing, yes, how wonderful. Personally, I can relate to that. It's just so powerful. You know, trauma is all about keeping everything stuck and avoiding it. So we kind of, it all gets tamped down and we avoid it. And not only do we need to move our bodies, like I said, you know, there's yoga, there's dance, there's all of this incredible stuff that gets us moving, but it's also about getting cognitively processing things too. So journaling is so powerful, and I would really highlight it as a great tool for people who don't feel ready to or don't want to go to a therapist. And don't even feel comfortable kind of opening up to people around them. You know, I hear you, I get it. A lot of people feel the same. Buy yourself a journal.
Can triggers be triggered subconsciously?
Yes, I would say that most of the process of being triggered is subconscious. We become consciously aware of it as we heal. But even then, a great deal of it is subconscious. We're not aware of it going on. So that is nothing to be worried about. It's completely normal. I'm not going to give a really detailed answer, but yes, a great deal of it goes on subconsciously. Yeah.
And I think that kind of reverts back to that initial discussion that we had about the body is doing something right. It's recognized it, even if you haven't identified it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I just noticed that there's a couple of comments in the chat about writing and also about being artistic in the kitchen. Now, I happen to really love jumping into the kitchen and cooking, particularly if I'm feeling a little bit stressed or anxious as well too. So cooking is another artistic outlet that you can kind of get your hands in and get messy and have something beautiful to create. How do you deal with your emotions if you're single and older but don't want to burden children and family?
Oh, I hear you. I hear you're not alone. I speak to a lot of people who feel the same. I suppose, you know, my first response would be talking about our feelings is not a burden. That is truly what I believe, and I feel like I need to state that truth here, because I get it. You know, I'm a mum. I tell my kids how I feel every day, you know, and it's really important to me that I draw that into parenting, you know, because what we do when we speak our feelings truthfully, honestly to our children, we give them permission to do the same. So I would urge you to remember that phrase, that when you are honest with your children, you give them permission to be honest about their feelings. Our feelings aren't the big scary things that we all think they are. We've been taught that they are. We've all been conditioned to kind of push them down and push the uncomfortable ones away, and that it's not okay to be not okay. You know, it's not okay to be not okay. You know, it's a pull your socks up and get on with life kind of culture, isn't it? But it does none of us any good. And upholding that lie really is what it is, upholding that kind of misperception with your children and your family, I would say, does none of you any favors. So I would, although I know it's so hard, I would encourage you to find the person that you feel the most comfortable with, that you feel you can trust, and just give it a try. You know, see how it feels to be open and honest about how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. And it will feel uncomfortable, but there's great healing that comes from that. And separate to that, I would encourage you to get a great therapist. They are the best. I would have been lost without them, because the truth is, no matter our age or our family situation, we all feel alone at times. And I've really needed my therapist at those times.
And of course, we do also have the phone services that we have of Lifeline and Beyond Blue as well too. If you do have any more questions, feel free to either email Sarah, or you can email the library on librarypromotional@centralcoast.nsw.gov.au. And I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Sarah for sharing her knowledge, experience and insight with all of us. I know that personally I find it a lot easier to take on board when you feel that somebody else has been through similar, or not even similar, because no one's experiences are the same, but someone who's actually lived it. And remember, if you do need help, if anything from today's discussion has raised any issues for you, you can contact Lifeline on 13114 for assistance, or call 000 for emergencies. The copy of the book will be in the library soon. However, if you do wish to purchase a copy for yourself to keep as kind of a little bit of a guide and to refer back to at different times, perhaps consider one of our independent booksellers on the Central Coast. And thank you everybody for being so brave, for taking the time out and sharing and listening. And I've certainly really enjoyed chatting with you, Sarah, and I really look forward to sort of having a little bit more of a read of the book. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us, and I wish you a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It was really wonderful. I loved it. Thank you for everyone. Thanks for showing up, everyone. It's been great.
It's been fabulous. Thanks so much.
Thank you. See ya.
If you found that this discussion has raised any issues for you, you can contact Lifeline on 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 4636. Please call 000 or the emergency number for the country you're located if you require urgent assistance.